Hello, it's me, Thick Basolo, and I'm doing a video on, since the previous video had a lot more views than previous ones, I decided to go on with another good book recommendation, 7 Myths of the Spanish Conquest, especially since the anniversary of the Conquest is coming in a few days, and I think it's a very simple guide, even including sources, so from everybody who was in the conquest and then debunking the mythological idea that people have, which I never understood. I remember one time I was with a friend and we were driving and he had this myth of the conquest, and I'm like, I read all the sources. I know that's, got to explain to him there was, the technology wasn't that much that the Spanish had. They had very little. And the people that were going to battle were crappy, and it was mostly natives and diseases. Well, when I mean natives, I mean that the Tlaxcaltecas helping the Spanish, and disease is the whole reason why the Spanish won. Beyond that, I think they would have gotten their hand kicked to them. And so, I'm like, what's a good simple book? And this happened, I forgot, I think it was on TV, and the guy interviewed talking about the whole book, and I'm like, okay, I gotta check it out. Read it, pretty good. And so it has a breakdown of 7 myths. The handful of adventurers, the myth of the exceptional men, and that one also brings up Columbus, Cortes, and Pizarro, and explained that there were nothing special about them. They were pretty much boring, having to have lots of luck, a lot of chances that they could have failed but didn't because of luck, And so it brings up that, brings a lot of original sources, stuff like that. The second myth, neither paid nor forced, the myth of the king's army. So this one debunks the whole Spaniards being these badass people, and pretty much breaking it down to they're just these guys that were mostly mercenaries. There was nothing army-like. The experience they had was very lackluster, So nothing very special. Like their experiences being in the Americas and not dying. And that's about it. The myth of the white conquistador, pretty much saying this one is a pretty good one because it talks about how there were more Africans with the Spanish, whether they were freed or slaves, with them, along with a lot of native allies, mostly Tlaxcalteca. In the number 4, the myth of completion. So there's this, I don't know where people get this idea or thought that once the conquest happens, it's over. The Spanish had all this land, but it talks about how there were other battles, other wars, just to get all of Mexico. And then my favorite chapter, the lost words of La Malinche, the myth of the miscommunication. So this one, I would say probably warped my mind on how I see the conquest, at least the communication part of it. Because usually I think as a kid, I imagine I would say that's one. One myth I kind of fell for was this perfect translations. But if you read this chapter, he points out every flaw, awkwardness in every document. So it's kind of funny. Like they talk about the one Cortes and Montezuma met. They give you every point of view of every writer who was there, and even Cortes. You had Bernal Diaz Castillo, like, oh yeah, Cortes wanted to shake his hand, and Montezuma was like, what the fuck, what are you trying to do? And then, Cortes is like, oh, I wanted to hug him, and then he kind of looked at me weird, like, what's going on here, and, but then it also talks about the whole communication of, the Spanish talking to Nahuatl speakers, so they had to had Malinche, Malatzin, Mariana, whatever you want to call her. No one knows her real name, even though the book doesn't say that, but kind of hints that. I think it just doesn't want to offend people on that aspect. Then it has aguilar as well. So you had, let's say, for example, Cortes wanted to talk to Montezuma. He first had to talk to Aguilar, who translated Spanish to Yucatec. Then Aguilar spoke Yucatec to Malinche, who then translated that into nahuatl. So it kind of points out, hey, it's practically musical chairs. Like, we don't know the exact words or what got miscommunicated. It even states on the book that we can do a lot of guesses, but we know when something messed up somewhere because of the response or the miscommunication, and it's always very interesting. And then you have myth 6, the Indians are coming to an end, the myth of native desolation, which is pretty much explaining how natives weren't the subservient natives, savage things that people like to romanticize, but that they were, human, pretty much. Some try to keep, the religion a secret. Some, at least the allies to the Spanish, thought that they were partners, So the whole idea myth that, oh, they're subservient, I never got that myth as well, but that's one I always see like on TV and stuff, and it debunks it. And then the Apes and Men, the myth of superiority. So this one brings up the whole, debunks the whole white superiority type thing that people have in their mind. Debunks the whole, they had all these weapons and they had a handful. Even brings sources, brings everything to practically, not that many horses, not that many swords. If anything, it pretty much doubles down on natives kind of help their ass. And then the epilogue is the Guatemala Betrayal. So he has 4 point of views of the Spanish. Well, 2 natives, 2 Spanish. And, it's always funny because people are like, there's always those people who go, the Spanish always lie. And I'd be like, okay, so who's lying and who's telling the truth on the whole Cuauhtemoc thing? Because Cortes, he had his word conspiracy that Cuauhtemoc was going to betray him, kill him, and everything and stuff. And Bernal Diaz is like, no, you're just super paranoid. You don't know what you're talking about. You just think everyone's out to get you type thing. So it has all these, kind of gives you a breakdown on what that is, and then how, I guess, the myth of the whole, the only thing we have evidence is the court case and Cuauhtemoc being found guilty. But beyond that, what happens before is up to debate, especially with court records and everything like that. And then another thing that this book has, it brings up a lot of Ridley Scott's 1492 film, which I remember as a kid, was not impressed. Then you could hear people outside. That one, I remember my mom was with me saying, oh, that didn't happen. That's a very romanticized thing. This is like back in 1992, and I was like 7 years old. And, I would say my mom was, I guess, the first person to debunk this mythological ideas that people have of Columbus. And it's very interesting, this whole thing. Like, I remember I watched that movie and I'm like, okay. Me, I guess I was, as a kid, I was expecting a very doom gloom film, because that's usually how it happens with some films. But this one, for some odd reason, had a very happy, glory, Columbus didn't do anything wrong type thing, and I never understood it. Matthew Restall is the writer for this book. 7 Minutes of the Spanish Conquest. Like I said, can't recommend it enough. Has a breakdown of every source, and kind of proves, hey, this mythological idea you have of the Spanish isn't real. They were human. They had lots of flaws. Anyway, I guess I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.